Alright guys, it is game time. We are doing the budget thing again today. And truthfully, unfortunately, this deck is by the day becoming increasingly obsolete for the format. Not because it's not good anymore, but because more and more of the cards that I depend on are creeping up over the $2 limit, which is a fundamental flaw with the 2DH format. It's one of the reasons why I've suggested not having the format update its card pool dynamically and having it done on a monthly basis or maybe every 2 months or something, so that you can build a deck and play with it and you don't have your deck made illegal because one particular card creeps up over the $2 limit. At least Muddle the Mixtures now over $2 for some reason, and it is a very, very critical tool to have in here. Not only as a counterspell, but obviously as a tutor enabler for things like Black Sun Zenith. But also a handful of other cards. I think Underground River is certainly well over $2 now. I think even Pithing Needle has gone over $2. So this deck is still budget for sure, and you could probably get the entire thing online for 5 tickets or something, but fundamentally it's not adhering to the 2DH format anymore, which I'm sad about because it's an awesome deck and very fun to play. However, I am not going to change it because I'm going to be stubborn about that. And until the founder of the format, Joel, tells me otherwise, I'm just going to stick with the current configuration. Anyway, I am up against Anafenza the Foremost, which is actually another general that's legal in the 2DH format. She's, despite being a mythic rare, and pretty amazing actually, she's only like $1.50 or something, or maybe even less. However, I am going first here, and I have a phenomenal hand with Brainstorm, Fact or Fiction, really good curve here. Black and blue mana, can't really ask for better out of this deck, short of getting maybe one accelerator. So we're definitely keeping here. He went away. Alright, first turn. Dralnu, you keep popping back. Certainly playing the Dismal Black Backwater first, just because I need to get black mana, and because no real reason to Brainstorm yet. And I gain life. Floodplain, alright. That's an interesting card to see. This guy, I suspect, probably doesn't have the full complement of fetches and dual lands then, if he's playing Floodplain. It's sort of like a poor man's Flooded Strand. Actually, it literally is, because it's like Flooded Strand, but comes into play tapped. Alright. Island, alright, not bad. Just going to chill here. Polluted Delta, okay. Temple Garden, yeah, so he definitely doesn't have any of the dual lands, not the really good ones. 2 mana, 2 white. Alright, well, Grand Abolisher is a beating against me, so I'm going to Brainstorm in response, of course, because I can't do it after it's resolved. Not that I'm going to be countering it anyway, because I've got the Edict to handle it. Oh, there's Doomblade there too, as well as Processor. We'll put the Processor back, and an island. That resolves. And of course, there's absolutely no reason not to kill this creature now, given that I can't Doomblade it on his turn anyway, and the Doomblade doesn't kill Anafenza, which I expect he'll cast next turn if he has nothing better to do. So we're going to save the Chainer's Edict for that and just kill this guy off right now. One thing I really like about the Dralnu deck is because it has such an inevitable win condition, it's really just a matter of filling your graveyard and dealing with threats one at a time. And if you can just play that game plan as you ramp up to 5 mana, especially against a deck that doesn't have burn spells, you can just play Dralnu out on around turn 5, and they very often can't do anything against it. I mean, they do have outs against it, and sometimes they make it cost 7, kill it and make it cost 7, but a lot of the time they just continue on casting creatures and doing their thing, and you just eat them alive with Dralnu. Unfortunately, he's casting Sylvan Library, which is extremely powerful against blue-black. And I have nothing to say about it. He's got 35 life to spend. I just have to hope that he's one of those guys that doesn't like to take 8 every turn. Processor. Well, as much as I'd like to play the Processor right now, I'm absolutely loath to cast this against the the Abzan colors, because they have a million different cards that can destroy artifacts, and if I were to pay a sizable amount of life, that would be sucky to have it destroyed, but it's more honestly important that I just have access to the card later because it's such a great finisher. So I'm not going to cast the Processor until I can protect it, which is pretty much par for the course most of the time. Against against most decks. There's certainly some decks you can play it out against. Usually against mono blue, you can play it early. Often against blue red, because they don't tend to play a lot of artifact kill spells. I guess they play bounce spells sometimes. I've yet to have this thing stolen by Dak Faden, so that's a plus. But my intention here is to just Fact or Fiction during the end of the turn, possibly dismiss if he plays something really devastating, although at 4 mana I don't really see him doing too much that's dangerous. I fully expect him to just play as general. Alright, 3 mana tap, 3 of each color, and there's Anafenza. Okay, cool. Which gives me an excellent opportunity to Fact or Fiction in response. And I really actually should have just cast this in response, because it would have made him, it certainly telegraphs an idea that I'm panicking and trying to get something. He doesn't know I'm playing budget and I don't have access to something like Force of Will. So casting Fact or Fiction when your opponent has something on the stack is often much better than waiting till end of turn, because they'll frequently assume that you're digging for answers, when obviously in this case I have a perfect answer in hand already. So I've got Future Sight, Trinket Mage, Into the Royal, Swamp, and Bojuka Bog. We'll wait for his split. That's his split right there, which I think is a fine split, given that the best card by far, the Future Sight, is in the 2 pile, so I would have to take it and a come into play tap land to go with it. And though I do have 4 blue out, I would have to have another land to deploy Future Sight. And I often really don't like playing this card at 5 mana. I like to play it on the turn after I've played my 5th mana source, because that way if I flip over a land I can immediately play it off the top of Future Sight, sort of Oracle of Moldea style. But given the fact that I feel like I'm really behind here, given the fact that he has both Sylvan and Anafenza, and I don't necessarily have a land on top of my deck to feed the Future Sight or to cast Future Sight with right away, I'm going to have to come and play tap land. I decide that as good as Future Sight is right now, I have enough mileage in the graveyard already with Fact or Fiction and Brainstorm that I can fuel, I can use Dralnu to cast those spells later, and I don't need the Future Sight now, whereas this is guaranteed mana, not only the Swamp for 5 next turn, but an additional 1 off Trinket Mage, as well as Into the Royal, which is always handy, so I'm going to go with the 3 pile here. I'm sure he's happy to see Future Sight gone. Given that split, it makes me feel like he doesn't have any enchantment removal in hand at the moment. Alright, 5 mana. So we're just going to play this guy. And even though this means I can't dismiss this turn, I feel like it's much more important, especially now that I've drawn Skeletal Vampire, which is a very viable clock against this sort of thing. I decide that it's more important right now for me to go and get more mana. So I'm going to use Trinket Mage. Those are my 5 targets, none of which are particularly great. But once again, I am going to take a simple land, because I do not want to tap out this turn to cast the Everflowing Chalice, and the Wayfarer's Bauble doesn't do anything for me. Certainly Pithing Needle does nothing, and yeah, that's basically it. It's just these artifact lands, which are pretty handy. And we're going to Chainer's Edict him right now before he can play something small. It needs to show me my graveyard, even though I'm totally tapped out. Vampiric Tutor during end step. Gross. Okay. Well, that happens. So I'm fully expecting something like Necro or Mind Twist to come down next turn. I was thinking mainly Mind Twist, and Mind Twist for 5 would just be, for 4 would be pretty devastating, but at least I would have the effective redraw with my Dralnu. So he taps a bunch of mana and casts Gideon, ally of Zendikar, which is an interesting choice. Given the number of Gideons that are out there, he has this one, and I assume he tutored for it. But, I guess it's not too bad. He gets 2/2s to deal with the rampaging Trinket Mage, and I can't get through at his guy. But he doesn't actually gain loyalty from making those knights. Yeah, these are knight allies, so it's not that big of a deal. Diabolic Edict. I could Edict here, kill the ally, and attack into Gideon to reduce it to 2, but I don't really think that that's particularly effective. I'm not really, honestly, that scared of the ultimate, because his creatures being a little bit bigger doesn't really have an impact on me. I'm more concerned about the fact that it's just a steady stream of 2/2s. So I'm going to cast Skeletal Vampire. And this is one of those situations, not only this turn, but the previous turn, where I think just instincts honed from many, many years of playing control decks kind of gives me a sense of when I need to tap out despite having counter magic in hand and when not to. People are always asking me about what my rules are for that, and I don't have like a specific rule set for when to do that and when not to. You kind of just need to be able to get a feel for the tempo of the game, figure out when you're ahead and when you're behind. When you're ahead, you can almost always afford to just sit on counterspells because your opponent is forced to take action that you can then respond to in whatever way you see fit. But if you're behind, sitting on counterspells is one of the easiest ways to lose the game. You have to push the action. You have to get yourself into a position where you're at least in parity or maybe ahead for those counterspells to start mattering. And I think that's something that's really just misunderstood by people who try to play control decks in general. A lot of people think that counterspells are just this mindless thing where you just counter over and over again whatever your opponent does. But the truth of the matter is that they don't work well that way at all. It's very, very easy to play around someone that's just sitting there with mana untapped every turn trying to counter everything you do. Because you're the one pressing the action. You're the one deciding what order the threats get deployed and not them. So you always want to be the leader in Magic. You want to be the person who is effectively being the aggressor, even if that's being the aggressor in Counter Wars. So in this case, I'm just going to tap out and cast Skeletal Vampire. Not only because it builds more board presence, which threatens his life total against the Sylvan Library, but of course it also gives me an evasive way to deal with the Gideon, which could become a problem long term. Although I do have this Black Sun Zenith in hand as a sweeper, which is very nice. So we're just chilling. I'm certainly not going to send Trinket Mage in because he would just block with the Knight for free. I'm keeping the Trinket Mage alive, especially because black often has ways to make you sack creatures. Of course, cards like Chainer's Edict and Diabolic Edict, and I don't want to have to sack these bats because these bats are much more important than a Grey Ogre. So he's using Sylvan. He's taken, I think 8 damage off of it. I feel like he's not being aggressive enough with it. You know, obviously if you've seen my videos, you know how I treat the Sylvan Library, and it's basically just mindlessly take 8 for the first 3 turns it's out. Stoneforge Mystic. All right, that is very problematic. Anything really that he gets with this is going to be terrible, and you can't see it in the chat, which I'm not going to open up, but he chooses, oh, I guess you can see it here, Foil Umezawa's Jitte. Very, very powerful right now. So he sits here, thinks about it for a while, and ultimately decides to make Gideon into a creature rather than making a 5/5, or making another 2/2, which I think is a huge mistake. Because you might as well make Knights and put Jitte on them based on the way that I have to respond here. And one of the things I love about Skeletal Vampire, in addition to how awesome of a clock it is and how much of a board presence it gives you and all the other cool tricks it does, well, here's one of them. It is very anti-Jitte. Because you can just block all day and sack bats. So his attack and his equipment with the Jitte were completely meaningless. As long as I've got bats up, I'm pretty protected against the Jitte, which is awesome. And I'm going to attack here. This was a mistake. I think attacking with both of these creatures was pretty dumb. Because I can't kill this thing off yet, because he made it a creature last turn. If I could kill it off, it would make sense to attack with both, but I think attacking with just the Skeletal Vampire made a lot more sense than leaving the bat back to deal with the next Jitte counter. It's kind of forced my hand in having to deal with it in an awkward way next turn, and I further compound the problem in a moment, which you'll see. I took another 4. Yeah, with Jitte and stuff going, I'd be going crazy off that Sylvan. It's very, very rare when it's not worth it to take 8 when you have this much life total against the blue-black deck. Alright, so he makes 2 more mana here. Quips, sends his guy in. So I'm going to cast Into the Royal on the Jitte here, and this is, I think, probably a mistake. My thought was this, is that it was, I wanted to cast Into the Royal without kicker, so I've got 5 mana available, assuming that he would just recast the Jitte, and then I would dismiss it and get it out of the game and be fine. But I make 2 mistakes here. First of all, I tap black for no reason when I should have tapped blue, because now I don't have double black available to use the Skeletal Vampire's ability to make a second bat. My reasoning, I guess, my post-hoc reasoning for it, was that it didn't matter because I was almost certainly going to be dismissing this turn anyway on whatever his play was, and presuming that that would be the Jitte that I bounced. That was my line of thinking, and that's why I think I would just sloppily tap the mana. But the truth of the matter is that I completely ignored the fact that he had Stoneforge Mystic in play, which means that he can just put Jitte back into play at instant speed, and I can't counter it. So I take the 2 damage, which is meaningless, and he plays Mayor of Averbrook, and, of course, passes. And I'm certainly not going to dismiss the Mayor because I've got Black Sun Zenith in my hand. But man, do I feel stupid here when I can't make another bat at the end of the turn because I tap my mana like a moron. Thirst is really, really good draw here. Alright, now at least I can kill off. And this, again, bad attack. I should have just sent in the Vampire. There's no reason to attack with the bat. I mean, I guess he could have Condescend or something, or I'm sorry, Condemn or Swords, and he's this thing's down to 1 counter, which would be, I mean, reason enough to maybe attack with both, though I do have the dismiss. And I probably would use it because it's my only answer to a Planeswalker right now. But he just takes it and loses his guy, which is fine. Alright, we're going to cast Thirst for Knowledge, and notice I tapped and untapped my black man. I'm doing this hoping to get another land so that I can still make bats. And I see Pithing Needle in here. And Pithing Needle is pretty good against Umezawa's Jitte, of course, which he still has in his hand. But I'm still thinking, oh, well, I'm still dismissing it when he replays it on the next turn. So I don't need the Pithing Needle. And so I choose to discard an artifact. And if I didn't discard Pithing Needle, I probably would have thrown away Diabolic Edict. Obviously, it's pretty useless, and Preordain, and kept the Pithing Needle for the Jitte. But I did not do that. And then at the end of the turn, he puts Jitte back into play, and I feel dumb. Alright, Sylvan Library. Takes no damage. So I see him tapping 3, and he casts Vryn Wingmare, which I was very happy to see him play before he attacked, or before he did anything else meaningful, before he even equipped. Because now that he's got only 2 mana left, and his non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast, and I don't care about creatures at all because I've got the Zenith, that means that I am now feel quite safe and confident that I can tap out during his attack step. So I'm going to do that. Sack this tap bat, make 2 more bats. Block with 1, do the trick again. Keep counters off the Jitte. Plays Fleece Mane Lion post-combat. 3/3 with Monstrosity. Alright. I'm really hoping for a land here because it's a little awkward that he played this non-creature spell things cost more. But we're not too concerned. So I'm just going to send all my guys in here. I mean, this is like the classic Telegraph, right? Although I guess he's low enough, being at 19, maybe he's low enough that he's concerned that taking 6 would be an issue, since I've shown that I can neutralize the Jitte pretty well. So sure enough, he blocks exactly the way I want to. Fleece Mane Lion blocks the Trinket Mage. And now I can just cast this happily for 2. Although it does cost 5 mana to do that. That crushes the whole board, leaving him down to 3 cards. And unfortunately, it shrinks my Vampire down to 1/1 because it puts counters on things instead of just until end of turn. But that's alright, I'm just going to Preordain here. I see Commander Sphere and Vault of Whispers. Well, the Sphere is 0 use right now, given the amount of mana I have in play. But I decide that I'm going to take the Vault because I just want more mana, so that I can do a Processor use it turn or cast a Dralnu dismiss turn, just to make that a little bit more comfortable. And that does, in fact, give me exactly the mana I need. That's 9 for Dralnu plus dismiss, or Dralnu plus Muddle plus Edict. So Sylvan takes no damage. Stirring Wildwood. Well, that's annoying. I do have a Diabolic Edict at least to potentially kill it during attack step, but I can't counter it. And now he spends 3 mana, and he vindicates a 1/1. That's how concerned he is about his life total. Well, I am happy about that, sir, given that I've got Phyrexian Processor in hand. And then he plays Spirit of the Labyrinth. Each player can't draw more than 1 card each turn, which is anti-Sylvan, but the Sylvan's already done its dirty work anyway, and I don't really feel like dealing with a 3/1 that might screw up my Dralnu plans, so we're just going to ice it at the end of the turn. Plus, obviously, it gives him something to throw the Jitte on. Cheaply, if he activates the Stirring Wildwood and puts Jitte on it, that's a total of, like 7 mana committed. I think it's 3 plus 2 plus the Wildwood to attack. So it's a huge amount of mana that he has to invest in that play. I'm not too concerned about that. So I draw a useless Cold Steel Heart, and I feel like right now I've got to make the decision to cast either Dralnu or I have to cast my my Processor. And my thinking is if I cast Dralnu, that works decently well. The problem is that if he equips his Stirring Wildwood and attacks with the Jitte on it, the Jitte is going to go up to 2 counters, which means that I have this potentially dangerous threat to deal with. He gets life gain going off of his Sylvan Library, and or to feed the Sylvan Library, and I have to make sure that the Jitte stays below 3 counters so he can't kill off Dralnu, which is a pain in the ass to deal with. So with that in mind, I decide it's not quite time to cast Dralnu, and that the fact that I can cast both the Processor and protect it with either Muddle or Dismiss means that this is the window to go for that. Ideally, I'd really, really wish I had 1 more land, because then I could go Processor, Muddle, and still use the Processor if he had an instant or sorcery way to deal with it. But I figure this is good enough. Now my opponent's at 15, I'm at 37. The question is, how much life to spend on the processor? I'll give you a moment to think about that. 3, 2, 1. All right, the answer, in my opinion at least, was to go for 19. And the reason I'm going for 19 is that 19 life means that even he only has one card left in hand. I have a dismiss at the ready, potentially. And I also have the Chainer's Edict in the graveyard. So if he does that equip Stirring Wildwood and attack play, that uses up almost all of his mana. If he plays one creature, I don't care about that. At the end of turn, I make a 19/19 minion, untap, Chainer's Edict him with Muddle the Mixture backup, and bash him for 19 and kill him, even though he could potentially gain 4 off the Jitte. So that's the amount I choose. 19 life processor. Go ahead. He uses his Sylvan, and now he's in an emergency situation, so he takes another 4. 3 mana. Eternal Witness. There's his graveyard right there. Now, I think in my position, a lot of people would have countered this creature right now, given the fact that it's a blocker, it's a Jitte holder, and gets him something quite good out of the graveyard. But I decided I'm going to let him have it, because the chances of one of these two cards potentially killing Processor are too high for me. And I know that if he gets something that does kill the Processor, like, say, the Vindicate, or he gets the Vampiric Tutor to tutor for a potentially better answer like Croson Grip, then I can just deal with the card that he gets. And I fully thought that he would probably play the Witness and potentially just go for the obvious play of just Vindicating, in which case I can dismiss that, and he'll be nearly tapped out. And even though I won't be able to make a minion this turn, he'll still be under tremendous pressure, because I can transmute Muddle for a counterspell or forbid, and still make processor tokens. I figured he also might just go for the more greedy play of Vampiric Tutor, trying to get Croson Grip to destroy the processor, but in that case I can just counter the tutor. So with that in mind, and the fact that he has 2 cards in hand that could potentially interact with the processor, I'm just going to let this thing go. And he gets Vampiric Tutor, which is a pretty interesting choice. And now he taps a bunch of mana, tapping out, in fact. And lo and behold, Acidic Slime. It was a perfect read, actually, that this thing was just bait. And I saved the dismiss, so I can counter it. I get a useless Expanse. And right now, I just got a message from him, right as that action happened, and there it is. GG. The game has ended, and Larabia scoops it up in the face of the rampaging processor. Only 10 life and pretty much no hope of digging himself out of this. And I was going to transmute the Muddle away. That would be 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I would transmute Muddle for a counterspell and just make a minion at the end of his turn, and I don't think he would be able to handle that, not with this little life, unless he were to get incredibly lucky and top deck a Croson Grip off of his Sylvan. But I thought this was an awesome game, just a really cool matchup of relatively high budget. I guess he doesn't have the alpha duels in his deck, but he's got quite a few good rares, certainly not a budget deck, matching up against Dralnu, doing its thing and having to make a lot of decisions along the way to work out a situation that worked. And I felt like I did some good reads, made a good decision with Fact or Fiction, certainly, and pretty much outplayed this guy to the win. Hope you enjoyed that game, and I will definitely have more to come. See you later.